Episode 43. What are you doing?
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
We are at episode 43 of the very best podcast in the world, Personal Supremacy Through Health, Wealth, and Happiness. And we are today going to discuss, or we're going to ask a question, what are you doing? And although it seems benign, there is more to it, as there always usually sometimes more often than not is. So in that sense, please stay tuned and feel welcomed, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, L's and G's and P's and T's and Q's and I's and N's, whatever. Whomever you are, welcome to this marvelous show. It's been really an interesting ride with tons of very cool feedback, and I did follow up with I followed up on the advice of attempting to do interview shows with interesting people. So I've been reaching out and kind of putting the gun to the head of some of the connections I have to put me in touch with really interesting people, and some of them have given their feedback. Now it's just down to technicalities and finding a schedule and, when are we going to record it? The whole ordeal. It's basically starting all over again with all of the technical difficulties that you had on the audio level. Now you're getting video to go along with that, which is, I don't know what it is. So let's see what comes out of it. But let's get back to the title of the show. What are you doing? And the show is going to be about awareness of the current situation and the importance of boiling the current situation down to be able to determine what you are actually doing at the moment. So it's about focusing on the actual task at hand, and including in that your characteristic values. and then you're like, okay, I got it, right? Okay. Let's see. Now I'm gonna put forth a very interesting example in where I was flabbergasted, really, but in a variety of ways. And that was my first arrival in the Maldives. Now, I am a kid that was born and raised close to the water. So I've seen my fair shares of oceans and open waters, and been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I'd seen the Gulf of Mexico with its pristine beaches, white sand, and kind of bluish water. And then you come to the North Sea, where I was born and raised long part of my life, which was, you had your occasional beach, so the Gulf of Mexico was kind of like, boom, it was like pretty cool, right? And I've seen beaches, right? And I've seen paradise seeming locations, right? But it's like this trip was marvelous by itself, right? I have to start at the beginning. I was in London, in England, and gave a speech at an important conference there. So I was totally worn out, and the subsequent contract in the Maldives began pretty much a day later. So I got my flight back from London to Hamburg. I had my parents meet me at the airport, exchange suitcases, and then off I went via Dubai to the Maldives. So, uh, anyhow, sat on the plane and it was like contemplating. I'd done my research, and you see all these pictures of these pristine beaches with white sand and blue water and the vibrance of the green palm trees and the lush vegetation on the islands. And you're like, okay, somebody spent a whole lot of money on a talented Photoshop expert to make these things pop the way they are, right? After all, it's a vacation brochure. How many times have you been fucked over by a hotel that you go to, and you arrive there and you're like, wait, what does this have to do with the pictures that I just saw, right? That's your expectation. It's just like that. You fell for marketing, you're the idiot. It happens to everyone, and usually multiple times over. So long story short, I get my ass on the airplane. I'm totally slumped because London is, yeah, I don't know if any one of you has ever made it out there without significant consumption of alcohol. And my consumption was, significant always when I was in that city for some unparticular reason. And it's you get to I went into into the Emirates Lounge in Hamburg in Germany, and yeah, just sat there, had my glass of whiskey, and everything was just honky dory. Had my, I don't know, total of 10 hours of flight time, and arrived in the Maldives, got out of the plane. The first kind of culture shock was that it's like landing on an aircraft carrier, only that you're not in a fighter jet where where you've got the opportunity to kind of, pull up and do another round, because, Boeing 777 is so much heavier and less maneuverable. So, if you skid off the runway at the end, but, you start thinking they've done this before, right? So you're calm and whatever. But, in the flight, or in the landing approach that we made, you flew over these little dots of sand and, lush vegetation and whatever. And you're like, okay, wow. The water is really that blue. How do they do that? Do they do tie-dyed or whatever? And then you're like, yeah, okay, let's get to the more civilized areas, because this was, still what, 200-300 kilometers out. And so we landed, and I cleared immigration after initial complications, as always. And then I went out for a cigarette and went into, you have to, this airport island is that, no idea, what is it? A few square kilometers, ridiculously small. And, went to the jetties, where the boats landed to take the tourists to the hotels, and the other business travelers via the traditional boats back to Male, the main island. And I looked at the water and I was like, wow, and I had this moment where you're like, you're, I don't know, flabbergasted, astonished, or whatever it is. At the end of the day, you're just standing there going like, wow. And that's one of the moments really that I mentioned in yesterday's episode, this happy place kind of setting, right? And while that is not my happy place, I can still describe the temperature, how it felt. I can more likely than not tell you what I was wearing. I can tell you immediately that there was this salty gasoline mix of slightly polluted ocean breeze at about 28 degrees Celsius, and that I was starting to sweat and transpirate because I was a bit more at the time, and so movement isn't my thing. Exercise, as you've probably learned by now, the same thing. And I was just standing there and looking at this turquoise/blue water, and I was like, wait, this is a city, right? And you've got tons of industry and tons of ships and boats and whatnot in this vicinity here. How do they actually manage to keep the water that blue? And I stood there probably for a minute or two while smoking my cigarette and asking myself how they did that. But I was so in the moment. I was so aware of everything. All of my senses were on not high alert. That would be a negative connotation. It has a negative connotation to it. But I was just receiving on all sensors, right? And I was taking in this moment, and I was down in that current situation. I was totally aware of it. And it's like, now comes the second part, boiling it down to what you're actually doing. And sometimes this, what you're actually doing, is just fucking being in awe, about the how dominant nature is, really, number one, in keeping all of our pollutants and everything away from the sea to a degree where, there's actually dolphins within a 2-kilometer vicinity of the islands just swimming around and having fun there. So, the water can't be all that bad, considering that, on the other side of the main island, you've got giant oil tankers delivering oil for the generators and so on and so forth to be redistributed to the resorts. This whole operation in the Maldives is anything but organic. While there are tons of efforts, there are just certain logistical challenges that you have if you live on less than a hectare of land within the middle of the fucking ocean. Right? There's certain logistical challenges that come with that, right? And particularly if you want to protect the environment. So it was like this whole thing going through my head, and listening to this quote, and this originally comes from Robert Downey Jr. when he was interviewed by Joe Rogan, I think about a year or two ago, no idea. And where it was like, what are you doing? Right? And if you can, at that moment, boil down any situation, that's a significant talent and very important to be able to get this degree of awareness and to reach this degree of awareness where your senses are just, I don't know. I'm looking for a word kind of to describe that. All of your senses are go. They're receiving. And you're so in the moment, right, that, you can just boil the situation down and say, okay, I am in awe, like for my situation, or I am doing, I don't know, I am now picking up the kids from school, or I am writing something down, or I am calling the muse to get new creative ideas to put down for the project that I'm doing. Right. And to sit in front of an empty notebook and to be aware of that, and just to take in that moment to then kind of trigger your creativity process to start going and to write stuff down, and then to take your journals and cross-reference and include and remove and whatnot. It's, there's many, many complications to that. However, what's the point I'm actually trying to make? Right. It's about, I think we can boil it down to focusing on the actual task at hand that is actually to be done at the moment, and to reach this level of focus at a moment's notice, because tasks change. That's another interesting thing which not a lot of people are cut out for. Now, that's where an example comes from, where I could tell you probably dozens. Is in fire department work, anything to do with rescue, because you get confronted with a situation, right? Imagine you're calling 911 or whatever the number in your country is, and you've got the dispatcher there, and the dispatcher asks you a ton of questions, and then he relays this information as accurately as he possibly fucking can to the emergency responders. And the emergency responders get this information, come to the scene of whatever happened, and now you've already got 3 intermediaries, because, you're not more likely than not going to be the person that owns the house that's currently burning down. So it's a neighbor. So the neighbor tells the dispatcher relays in written form and text form to the emergency responders. The responders go there. And meanwhile, a quarter of an hour has gone by. And in terms of building fires, that's a fucking eternity. Right? So you get to the situation is totally different. Meanwhile, nobody has really updated you, right? But you can, so you're kind of projecting, the building, if you know it, if you're lucky enough to know it. Sorry. So you get there, and the entire situation has turned from a burning I don't know, whatever, roof to an inferno, endangering the houses next by, right? Or the houses next to it. And so it's a lot is about really being able to focus in that moment and not be, like in that situation, had you focused just on the information that you got from the dispatcher, you would have been fucked. So you're anticipating that the situation you get to eventually is going to be totally different. And by anticipating that, you're able to readjust and refocus on the situation as it is in that current moment, present moment in time. And then are you really good? Because you're able to adapt. And people who are able to adapt quickly and to work with the resources at hand to a degree where it's still professional, that's very seldom. And I've come across very seldomly come across people who, wouldn't have taken some time, which you don't have in situations like that, to whine and complain and moan and tell you all the things that wouldn't be possible currently. But that's not what we're looking for, right? You've got a fucking inferno. You're trying to protect the two houses which are adjacent to the one that's burning from also catching fire. And, there are some valuables in the house, and it's not really at immediate danger of collapsing. So, it's like you ask the homeowners, where's your stuff? They're like, upstairs. You're like, okay, come on, let's try this again, because we've got tons of smoke in there and we're trying everything, but how many steps? And they're like, wait, what? So, it's about this focus aspect would, for instance, count how many steps is it from your kitchen to the shitter in your apartment, right? You couldn't tell me. And that's really this kind of like awareness. And why should you? You've got eyes and ears and you're seeing that there's a wall in front of you, and so on and so forth. But it helps. It's like, you can call me paranoid, but whenever I go to a hotel, especially in a country that's, somehow considered dangerous, I'm going to look for the fucking emergency exit. And I'm going to know exactly where the elevators are. And I'm going to know how many steps it is from my hotel room door to the shitter. And I'm going to remember how many steps it is from the bed to the door. Should I go left or right? Where's the emergency exit? What's the best possibility to take, so that if a situation arises, which I, just can't control, I'm going to get out of there alive, maybe slightly injured, but more likely than not alive, unless the building collapses, whatever. It's really something that we haven't been practicing a lot, because we're taking this entire secure and bubble wrapped life for granted, right? You don't really anticipate to run into a gunman somewhere, which is realistic. As someone who grew up in the financial sector, I've had my fair share of risk calculations and probability and statistics and whatnot. So, is there? No, there's not. But, building fires happen. And if a hotel, goes up in flames, we've got building codes in most parts of the Western world. But I don't know about the building codes in Korea, or Japan or Singapore. In Japan, they're going to be good because most of the hotels are actually earthquake proof. But I'm imagining, but I don't know. That's assumptions are the mother of all fuck ups, as we so adequately put it in another episode. So, it's about this focus and this awareness and transporting it into your everyday life. And it makes the tasks at hand just much more easier to really manage. Because, if you're confronted with a task, more likely than not, your plan that you've made to solve it has been sabotaged the moment you finished planning it, right? So stuff happens, you have a detour on the road to pick up the kids, you've got whatever it is at the end of the day that fucks up your plan. Plans are there to be fucked up, right? That's what plans are essentially for. So it's about improvising. I think that's the correctest word to use in this context. And that being said, I think everything is said for this episode. I think we're gonna kill it here and now. I'm gonna wish you No, first of all, sorry, forget that always, recently. Please do send your feedback, comments, or whatever to the very best podcast in the world at gmail.com. And yeah, now it's time to say goodbye. Until tomorrow, I wish you a pleasant day, a successful day. Yeah, what else do I wish you? Good night if you've already had your successful day. And I will see you tomorrow when maybe I've got this in the close up, in the what do you call it? Down selection, whatever. We're going to talk about silence. So, in that sense, good night, successful day. Keep your hands above the blanket. See you tomorrow. Over and out.